This is Ojai, Hendricks interview, take one.
And check my focus real quick before we start.
Sure. Then you.
Ojai film, Gay Hendricks interview, take two.
I was 24 years old, and I would say that everything that could possibly be wrong with my life was wrong. I weighed 120 pounds more than I weigh now, and I smoked 2 or 3 packs of cigarettes a day, and I was in a terrible relationship, and I had a job I hated, and so I couldn't think of much. Oh, I didn't like my car either. So I think just about everything was wrong. I'd always struggled with obesity. I was born, even by the end of my first year of life, I was very fat as a child, and I was taken around to different specialists and things because my mother and my brother were skinny, and so there was something going on there. And so by the time I was 24 years old, I weighed over 100 pounds, more than I weigh now, so I weighed 300 some pounds. And in addition, all this other stuff was going on too. And so I went out for a walk one afternoon. It was a winter in New England, and I was walking just kind of thinking about how am I going to get out of all of this? You know, how am I going to get out of my life? And I stepped on a patch of ice that had some snow over it, and I didn't see the patch of ice, and I stepped on the patch of ice, and my feet shot out from under me, and I went whoomp down on the back of my head on the frozen road, and I hit myself just hard enough that it didn't knock me out. What it did was it kind of knocked me into a state of consciousness that was like nothing else I've ever experienced before. I was present, but I was also, something else was going on. I was kind of like could see more than I could normally see inside myself. And I think I was laying on the ground for maybe 2 minutes or so. In this 2 minutes, I could see down through all the levels of myself. And I'd never been able to see this before. It was like I saw why my muscles were tense. I saw that I had all of this fat around my body and my muscles were tense, and that all of the fat and the muscles tenseness was there because I had all of these feelings inside me that I had never opened up to, like all these things I was angry about that I'd never told anybody about, and all these things I was sad about that I'd never told anybody about, and things I was scared about. And it was like I could see the level of the meat, and then I could see down in the level of the emotion, and then I could see down underneath everything that there was this clear space that there was nothing kind of written on it. There was nothing there. It was kind of like a spiritual space or an open space with pure potential. And I saw that all of those feelings and all of that tension and all of that fat was there because I was living somebody else's life, basically. And that I wouldn't have that stuff if I had a different life. And what I mean by that is my father had died before I was born. He died while my mother was pregnant with me. And he was very obese, just like I was. He smoked heavily, had probably not a very good relationship with my mother, and I know they had a lot of struggles. And so he died in the midst of, while I was gestating, and so I never actually knew him in the world. But I had sort of taken on his life. That's what I could see down inside myself, that it wasn't even my life. And it was an incredible moment. I think I'd never had anything like that because I always thought this was the reality. This was all there was. You know, and I'd never had a moment of awakening to spirit. And I think that, you know, I always say it is that if you're open, the universe will teach you by tickling you with a feather. But if you're not open, it has to hit you with a sledgehammer. Well, I was so closed that this was like getting hit by a sledgehammer. That was the only way I could learn what I needed to learn, I guess. And so I was in that altered state of consciousness for about 2 minutes, I think. And I began to come back to regular consciousness. I could feel my muscles kind of assembling their tension, and I could feel my awareness of all of this obesity around me. And I could still feel, though, that very sweet, open space down in there, that sweet, open spiritual space that didn't have anything on it. And as I was coming back to regular consciousness, I had these several thoughts that were very different from anything I'd ever thought. One thought was, I'm going to find out what I can do to feel that clear space all the time. And I thought, I'm going to do what I can to find out how to live that way, how to feel that all the time in my life. And the other thought I had was, I'm going to live my own life. I don't have to live my father's life or anybody's life. I can invent my own life. And if that's possible, how do I want it to be? And so as I was coming back to regular consciousness, I made a commitment to feeling that spiritual space all the time, and then to invent a healthy body, basically, and invent a great life. So I make this new commitment to, I really want to learn how to feel spirit all the time, just in ordinary life. And a friend of mine came over to my house one afternoon and said that one of his old Harvard professors had just come back from India and was giving a talk down the road about 30 miles at his father's house. And did I want to come and hear him? And I said, well, what's he talking about? And he said, well, he'd gone to India and he'd kind of gotten enlightened, and he was talking about yoga and meditation. And I thought, well, that sounds kind of interesting, you know, maybe I'll go. And so we go down there, and there is this guy in a robe, a white robe, and there's all these devotees around. I remember a girl came up and offered us fruit from a fruit bowl, you know, and I was thinking, what is this? You know, is this some cult or something? Well, it turned out to be Ram Dass, who was Neil's Harvard professor. Under those days, he was named Richard Alpert, and when Neil had taken his course at Harvard, and now he was named Ram Dass. And so Ram Dass had just come back from India, and he was just totally, you know, he was so blissed out and everything. And part of me related to it, but another part of me thought, what are these people selling? You know, like, I was very cynical about that kind of thing at the time. And so I went up after the talk and asked Ram Dass, I said, look, I got to tell you, I'm very skeptical about this kind of stuff. This looks sort of insane to me, but since I'm here, I just had this experience where I fell on the ice, and I told him the experience. And I said, so I want to learn how to feel that clear feeling in me all the time, just in ordinary life. I felt it for a minute while I was sort of knocked out, but I'd like to feel it all the time without bashing my head on the ice. And I remember he looked up at me for a long time, and just sort of looked at me up and down. And he said, you should do some breathing exercises. And I said, breathing exercises? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? I never heard of anything like that. And he said, well, in India, if you have a problem, you might do some yoga around it or some breathing around it. And it's as valid a way as talking to a therapist about it. And so I said, well, where do you get something like this? And he said, well, just be open to it. It'll come to you. And I said, all right. And so the next day, I was down at the grocery store, and in the checkout line, so I was, you know, pushing my cart up through the checkout line, and they had a little kiosk of paperback books, a little round kiosk of paperback books. And I glanced down, and there is a book called Yoga, Youth, and Reincarnation. I'll never forget this, by Jess Stern. And I can see the cover just like it's sitting right here now. And I remember looking at this, okay, Yoga, Youth, and Reincarnation. All right, that's interesting. And so I picked it up, and I open it up, and there's an entire chapter on breathing exercises, pranayama. So here I go in one day, from never having heard of something, to Ram Dass telling me, be open to it, to there it is in my hand. And so I bought it. And so I took it home, and I just started doing the exercises all the way through. I remember it was a Saturday afternoon, and my wife and baby were gone to visit her mother, who lived about maybe 40 miles away, and so I had the place to myself. And I just started doing these exercises right out of the book. I would do one and then flip the page and do another one. So I started about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. By about midnight, you know, and after doing all of these breathing and yoga exercises and chanting and everything like that, I was in touch with that same space that I'd felt when I bashed myself on the ice falling down. And so there it was, you know, there was a whole different way to get there.